Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and today I decided to have some fun in Battlefield 4 and ran around as a recon in hardcore mode, but the twist on it, and to make things really interesting, I decided to turn off my UI. I like to call this my ultra realism game mode, the game mode that I play all by myself because everyone else that I'm going against is still playing hardcore. They're still at the disadvantage that you take a lot of damage, but of course they're still using their UI. This seriously has to be one of the coolest ways to play the game because it adds in a further layer of cinematic and realistic gameplay that you just do not experience in any other game mode or even in hardcore mode. I realize that Battlefield isn't really all that realistic when we get down to it. There are a myriad of things that while the game is clearly authentic, it has that authentic feel, this is a video game at the end of the day, and it doesn't go for that all-out realism. But as soon as you're playing as a recon, you're playing as a sniper, and you do turn off your UI, there are a lot of parallels to real-life combat that you can make, and it really just enhances that gameplay even more. One thing that I loved about this is that you have to confirm your kill after every single time that you squeeze the trigger. I saw some pretty incredible ragdolls. You don't really notice the ragdolls normally. I mean, sure, if you see a ragdoll fly across your screen, it's funny. Like, those are always enjoyable. But the normal ragdolls, where the enemy just kind of falls on over, you don't really notice that with the clutter of the UI on your screen. Like, sure, it's there. You notice that they're falling on over, but you don't really appreciate it until you turn off your UI. I saw some incredible ragdolls. Guys falling over, sliding on their face as soon as they died, people sprawling out, flying across the screen. It was amazing, and I think it added to that further layer of realism. In real life, a sniper is not going to get a nifty 100-point kill notification every single time that they take someone out. They're not going to get a boom headshot bonus. They're going to have to wait and see if the enemy drops. And so I think it's because of that, and the ragdolls, of course, that just made this so much more satisfying. It felt cinematic. It felt like I was in the middle of a movie, kind of confirming and watching my enemies die that you see in one of those huge cinematics when you go to the theaters, and it just made it that much more gratifying. Another thing I loved about this is that because I had to focus on the visuals so much more, that was the only way that I was going to be able to figure out what the hell was going on around me, using the visuals and the audio. I had to be really dialed into those two senses. I started to notice the subtle details that went into creating Battlefield 4. Not only the ragdolls, which were spectacular, but also the lighting effects, the smoke, the environment interacting with you and everything around you, cars launching off of ramps. It was awesome, but I also noticed some of the more subtle and funnier aspects that you just never really realize are in the game. Here, for example, I love this moment. I was running around on the rooftop on Dawnbreaker. I spawned in on one of the beacons, and I noticed this reflection. My first gut reaction was, wait a second, this reflection looks like it's reflecting daylight, like in the middle of the day. Then I realized, wait a second, that building looks oddly familiar and I've never seen it on Dawnbreaker. Pretty sure that's the building on Siege of Shanghai. And while I'm by no means trying to criticize DICE on this point, because I realize a lot of development goes into creating these maps, and as long as the reflection looks somewhat decent, it doesn't really matter. I would actually say that it enhances the gameplay. You're not gonna notice the exact reflection when you're running around killing people. You're gonna notice maybe in your periphery, like, oh man, that's an awesome reflection. It just adds to the world, it adds to that realism. But the only reason I bring this up, and the only reason why I noticed this, was because I had turned off my UI. I was so in tune with the environment around me, and I started to notice these small, subtle details. I thought it was really cool. The one thing I did take away from this, though, was that this has basically solidified my stance that bolt-action rifles in hardcore mode are pretty much broken. I was reaching the top of the scoreboard. I think I had, on average, a 3 kill death ratio. I mean, I was getting 3 kills for every death. It was insane, even though I had this disadvantage. Like, I was at a huge disadvantage to everyone else. I had to be very cautious when I was moving around the map, and even with those handicaps, I was still reaching the top of the scoreboard, and I think it was mainly contributed to the ridiculous power of the bolt-action rifles. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the easiest thing, especially because everyone else hits just as hard as you do. I mean, when you go toe-to-toe with an assault rifle and they know you're there, you're not going to be able to live very long if you miss that first shot. But even still, just the crazy amount of killing potential of the bolt-action rifles seems excessive. And while I know that this is never going to change, the game has been out for 2 years at this point, it does show to me why a lot of people avoid hardcore and why a lot of servers have adopted only allowing maybe like a couple of people to use bolt action rifles, or just completely ban them from the server altogether. Even like the designated marksman rifles. It's still fun. Like, I'm glad that I did this, but man, are these weapons ridiculously powerful in this game mode. Like, it is absolutely insanity. But overall, I highly recommend that you give this a try if you've never done something like this in Battlefield 4. Yes, there are going to be some growing pains. You are going to have to get adjusted to never having to rely on your UI. You're probably going to kill a few teammates here and there. You're going to feel awful. Every time I killed a teammate, I felt like a despicable human being. I immediately said, sorry. I have no idea what I'm doing. Please forgive me. And one way that you can work around this is that I would recommend playing a server that has US and the China faction. China and US, their uniforms are vastly different. China has the nice black uniforms. They all look like black leotards. And then the US, they all have very distinctive, more of a tan uniform. If you play on either of the side, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to know who you're shooting at. And as soon as you go against like Russia and US, it becomes much more challenging to make that distinction. And so I highly recommend that you give this a go, but just be warned that if you do go into a server where you are US versus Russia, things can get a little bit too crazy. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's little adventure through my ultra-realistic sniper game mode. I hope you enjoyed. But until tomorrow, have a good one, and take it easy.